Mr. Gene Fitzpatrick.
When I was up in the maternity wing, girls only had the message, like, and the big poster of the pregnant lady, you know, the one with the cigarette, and it says, "For your baby's sake, do not smoke." And underneath it said, "The first 2 minutes of life are the most dangerous." And somebody written underneath, "The last two's not right home about either." My life changed forever at this baptismal font. Now, I don't mean to get very, very religious, no. Between Banbridge Hospital and here, my name changed. Because I was born 26th of May, 1945, Dominic Fitzpatrick. But when I got here with the godparents, the priest decided that the new bishop in the Diocese of Dromore was Eugene O'Doherty, and the new pope in Rome was Eugenio Pacelli. So he decided, Eugene's a far better name for a boy. And I have never been called Dominic from that day to this. This wee fellow was working in Goodyear in Lurgan, right? And he got all his fingers cut off a machine, and they rushed him up to Lurgan Hospital, and the surgeon says, "Well, what actually happened?" He says, "So, I was working up there in Goodyear, and I got all my fingers cut off in the machine." He says, "Where are your fingers now?" He says, "So, I ran up in Goodyear." He says, "Why didn't you bring him with you?" He says, "I couldn't pick him up." I'm just about to enter the first bypass in Europe. Banbridge is commonly known as the town with a hole in the middle, and the reason for it one day is the stagecoaches couldn't get up over the hill because of the frosty weather, so they just cut a hole right through the middle. Hence the first bypass in Europe. That's Mount Royal. That's where I lived with my mother and father in that house up there, the one with the blue door. In fact, believe it or not, there were 13 of us lived there. The houses were designed by the gentleman who designed the Slieve Donner Hotel in Newcastle. Lovely setting, just 150 yards from Banbridge. There's the War Memorial down there, just a stone's throw from where I was born and bred. My ma had 15 of us. You should talk about the big happy Irish family. The only constellation in the family that always says the toilet seat never got cold. Children of today are spoiled rotten. Kids today, you ask, what do you get for Christmas, son? Computer. One year I got an empty box and my dad told me it was an Action Man deserter. This is Newry Street. Not as it used to be. When I was a wee boy running around Newry Street, my father had a business here just where this shop is, this whole area. It's a taxi business. And all along here he had petrol pumps. And the taxis and the self-drive cars would be parked along here. In fact, that's why I was driving this magnificent old Woolsey motor car. Come on, do you see this car? These cars were just the bee's knees in the 60s. Real leather seats, the wonderful smell of leather. Inside, wood in the dash. And this is where we used to sit. Castle Ballroom was across there. We used to dance there on a Friday night. And that's where I first danced with my wife to a Dickie Rock song called Just for Old Time's Sake. I'm married that long, I swear to God, the wife. After you're married so many years, they hate you, you know. They do. Honestly, one time I took a heart attack and she wrote for an ambulance. About 50 years ago, this was my classroom. When I was a wee boy, went to St. Patrick's Primary School in Banbridge. This used to be the site of the primary school. I learned to read and write here. And that's the chapel, St. Patrick's Chapel, built way back in 1841. And you know, there's a cine movie of me coming out of Mass with my granny. I was only 6 years of age in 1951. I used the collections here every Saturday afternoon between the hours of 5 o'clock and 7. In fact, we were made come because my mother and father were very religious, and they made sure everybody in our family came to confessions every Saturday afternoon. The people would be queued up right down this side, right up there, and there were a couple of confession boxes, one in the right-hand corner over there, which is the one that I used to go to all the time, and one over here where the priest, as far as I remember, was a wee bit deaf on it. Maybe he wasn't deaf, maybe he just shouted too loud, but I didn't want to go to him because if my mother found half the things that I was at, and yet I was a wee innocent creature, I'd have got slaughtered. And we timed people, now not with a watch, because we didn't really have watches when I was sort of 8 or 9 years of age. You sort of timed them, and you were nudging the fella beside you. Your woman's in there quite a long time. Wonder what she's been doing. And you'd actually stir the poor woman when she's coming out of the confession box. And here we go again, into the boys do. I've always wondered what in round the back. Have a wee previews now that there's nobody here. Oh, very high tech, very posh. Lights and everything. Oh, I would have frightened the life out of me in my day. You did what? 92 years of age, went to confessions. He says, Father, I'm 92 and I've got a 24-year-old girl in trouble. And the priest says, that's a terrible way for a Catholic man to be carrying on. Oh, God, Father, he says, I'm not a Catholic, I'm a Protestant. And the priest says, if you're a Protestant, what the hell are you telling me for? He says, I ain't telling everybody. When I was a wee boy living in Banbridge, they used to call me Dudine. That was my nickname because I couldn't pronounce the name Eugene. And the person that gave me that name is a lady who knows more about me than probably any other human being, with the exceptions of my wife, and that's Mina Downey.
Do you remember what you used to do when your Auntie Bernadette sent you out like a young prince, and all your finery and your lovely velvet trousers, and you were dressed to kill?
I was a bit spoiled then, wasn't I?
And do you know what he did? Out in the entry, took the trousers off, up the street, no trousers on him.
I didn't run around with my trousers off.
Oh, of course he did. He did. Everybody knew. They would say, here comes Dudy, trouserless.
Our youngest one came into the bedroom this morning and says, Daddy, I'm 15, can I wear a bra? I said, now listen, Richard.
Then, Dudy, do you remember the time a certain lady had her black undies stolen from the line?
Definitely wasn't me.
Now, I tell
Definitely
you,
was not
there were
me.
Fingers pointed everywhere, but I had my suspicions, and I think I am right. I knew what happened to the black undies.
We knew nothing about sex. Look, we were brought up in that sort of era where you knew nothing. If you'd asked her, I used to say, Mommy, where do babies come from? And she said to me, you were found under a cabbage leaf up the garden. Remember that out of Carry On used to talk? And I come home from school one day and I'm hooking. And I find a wee caterpillar and I says, you're dead ugly, but you're my wee brother.
Didn't you go to the Gaeltacht one time?
No, that wasn't me either.
Listen.
Here we go again.
I was in Newcastle. No, it wasn't. We went to Gweedore. And I heard about this student from Banbridge. He was sent home for mooning. And I said, well, I know who that is. He's at it again. He's never stopped it. He's still at it.
Two fellas are out fishing in the lagoon. And one fella's catching everything. The fella's catching nothing. And the fella's catching nothing said to the other fella, how come you're catching everything and I can catch nothing? He said, you have to hit the lum long. He says, you what? You have to hit the lum long. He says, I can't make out a word you're saying. He says, you have to keep the worms warm. My granny used to have the house in there and the shop and the bar. Hi, girls.
Right.
And I used to come out here and practice my songs when I was a wee lad. Yes, because there was a natural echo in that yard, and I used to sing, oh, Rosemary, I love you. I'm always dreaming of you. No matter what I do, I can't forget you. Sometimes I wish that I had never met you. I'm overwhelmed. I used to practice Rosemary in this lovely entry because it had a natural echo. I was in there for a talent contest in the Temperance Hall when I was a wee boy about 7 years of age, and I was gutted because I was told it had been cancelled, and I didn't find out the truth until about 40 years later when I was talking to my aunt about why it had been cancelled. She told me that my father had told her to tell him it's cancelled because no son of mine is going to be in the stage, and she never owned up to that lie until I was nearly 50 years of age. Do you know there was an advert in the Belfast Telegraph recently? They were looking for somebody in charge of the lions up at Bellevue Zoo in Belfast. And we saw me went up, he says, like, I'm up here from the brew about a job what was advertised in the Telegraph for somebody in charge of the lions. And the zookeeper says, we've only one other candidate for the job, so we'll interview the both of you the one time. He says, no bar, I'll just howl on here. And this gorgeous blonde come walking up through the zoo grounds, and she said she was after the job too. And the zookeeper, the best way to do it is who's going to go into the enclosure first and try and quieten the lions down? We saw me been a real male chauvinist pig, says, no bar. Women first. And your woman went into the cage, her coat off, and she hadn't a stitch on, and the big lions just walked over and licked her feet, and up and licked her face. And the zookeeper says, Sammy, can you do better or not? Sammy says, I couldn't eat. He says, but get that lion out of there first. I remember that you here. This is a statue of St. Bernadette, and behind me, St. Coleman's College, Newry, where I was educated from 1958 to 1964. And you see St. Bernadette here? Boy, she was a queer source of income for senior boys. Because they told us, we lads, in our first few years, if you put 2 shillings or half a crown underneath her, you would fly through your exams, not a bother at all. So, of course, we were putting the money in. Little did we know the senior boys were coming along, stealing, clearing off and buying fags and all sorts of things you did in those days. Mind you, I conned a few myself as I became a senior, but the priests and the teachers have cottoned on. They'll have her cemented down. See up there behind the tree? That's the Bishop's Palace. And this path that I'm on, we were never ever allowed up here. In fact, not only were we not allowed, you were terrified to go up here. And even today, I still feel a wee bit sort of scared about it, because even now you wouldn't know what's up there. Do you know that programme Matthew Kelly does, Stars in Her Eyes? There's a wee Belfast fella on that one there, wee Sammy, and Matthew says, you know Matthew looking down at wee Sammy says, Sammy, it's lovely to see. Sammy says, it's great to be here, Matthew, on your programme tonight, Stars in Her Eyes. And I'm looking forward to it and all. And Matthew says, well, tonight, Sammy, who are you going to be? He says, tonight, Matthew, I am going to be Glenn Miller. And he walks into the mist and never saw him again. When I was a boarder here, this was the senior study hall. Boy, it has changed so much since those days. But one thing that hasn't changed is this wonderful old bookcase. Come here. That's my favourite music in the whole world. I find it incredibly moving. That's me. 1960, 15 years of age, film star looks, and the hair to go with it as well too. 1960, that was a great year. That was the year that Down won the All-Ireland for the first time. And because the college had so many of their ex-students in the Down team, they brought the Sam Maguire Cup to the college to let us all view it. It was here for quite a while, but I'm going to let you into a wee secret. When they brought the cup on this great plinth that it sat on, we all decided that we'd put it, so we all wrote our name with pen knives and all sorts of things into the plinth of the great Sam Maguire Cup. When the priests saw it, they went bananas. There was about a dozen that was brought out of class and slaughtered, and the plinth of the cup had to be sent down to Newry to a cabinet maker who had to rub it all down and re-varnish it. And hopefully nobody would ever find out about it. Until now, I've spilt the beans. There's this wee farm over in Portadown, you know, between Portadown and Armagh, about Rich Hill. And he needed a new bull. He had a couple of bulls, but he needed another one. So he went on the web, because everybody's in the World Wide Web now, looking for a bull, and he went www.bull.com. And he got this bull in Spain, and he ordered it. And 3 weeks later, this big cattle lorry reverses into the yard and the farm between Rich Hill and sort of here. And the other bulls are standing, 3 bulls standing, look at the size of your man. And this boy came out of the lorry like 4 dumper trucks, you know. Look at the size of your man. And the big bull says, I'll tell you one thing. He can have half a dozen of my cows anytime he wants. And the medium-sized bull says, and he can have half a dozen of mine too. And the wee bull, he started scraping the ground and snorting and all the rest. He says, are you going to fight him? Lead him not. He says, I'm just making sure he knows I'm a bull. Even though I live 13 miles up the road in Banbridge, I boarded at St Coleman's College in Newry. And do you know who boarded in those days too? And I see after 40 years he's still not much good at making a bed.
It's a pretty good corner, I'll tell you.
Sean Rafferty, he still can't make beds.
I can't. It's not awful to me.
But one of the greatest scams of all time. We could have taught the world as Kraft. I hope the people from Kraft don't turn catch us. We were boys at 11 and 12 years of age at boarding school. We used to get the cheese and set it outside.
So it went nicely rancid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People would eat it now, of course, because it looked more organic. But
and then we sent it off to Kraft and said, this is the state we got this cheese.
And you got this lovely presentation pack back. Thank you very much indeed, by the way.
I think after about 4 presentation packs to the same address at Violet Hill in Newry, Kraft caught on, and that was the end of it.
They did. But I mean, you would have done anything for a little variety in the diet. Because, do you remember whenever we used to, there were prefects at the end of each table, and they could go around and trade in. So if you didn't want your once a week cornflakes,
that's right,
you could trade those in for a 3-spotted dick or something, I think was it. And then he said one day, the president came out and he said, there will in future be no more bartering of foodstuffs.
Right. Do you know they've opened a new Chinese restaurant now in Portadown called the Orange Wok? Do you remember about once a month or once every 6 weeks, Father Brooks, who was the bishop now, used to show a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And you see the Marx Brothers at the races and these different movies.
With nun-proof plugs, I remember him saying.
And remember a particular movie when some fella was kissing a girl and his hand was put camera and lens under the kissing was over and then he'd take it down again. And that's what we were not allowed to watch even a girl getting kissed.
Well, I remember going because the last year, I think it was O-levels, must have been, and there was a week between the last exam, the penultimate exam, and Latin.
Yeah. And
there were a few of us left who were waiting to do the Latin exam. And I went up and said, look, people are going to go absolutely crackers. Can we go to the movies? And he said, yes, all right. And then he came back and he said, no, you can't go. Mm-hmm. And because he passed a poster for this lascivious movie and seen a girl in a bikini on it. And guess what this offensive movie was? You remember?
Cliff
Richard, Summer Holiday.
Summer Holiday.
I mean, can you imagine? It's like telling somebody, you can't go to the Sound of Music, really. Yeah.
There was a boy left Mullabown, South Armagh, Mullabown, over to Canada looking for a job, and he had no CV and he had neither, nothing, reference is not a thing. And he went looking for a job as a lumberjack. He says, now, we'll have to give you a wee test. Go ahead and chop down a few trees. So he man from Mullabown went out and he chopped down 10 trees and about 15. He says, God, we never saw anybody get chopped down trees like that. Where under God's name did you learn to do that? Your man says in the Sahara Forest. He says, you mean the Sahara Desert? He says, that's what they call it now.
For those who don't know you in your present incarnation, you weren't famous for telling jokes at school at all. Nope. You were famous for nicking Tommy Sands' sandwiches.
He could sing all day. He must have known a million songs. When the teachers came, they had to sing along. On football pitches, he had us in stitches. And even though he ate my sandwiches, I'm glad to say he was a very good friend of mine. And still today, he's a very good friend of mine. Gene.
Tommy.
Gene, for the occasion, I decided to bring you along some sandwiches. So rather than you take them from me, I decided to hand them over voluntarily for a change.
Tommy, there's only one thing wrong. Any of the sandwiches I got from you was always homemade wheaten bread.
That's right.
Okay, and your mother, God love her, she'd put jam in the middle of it. And she'd make the sandwiches maybe the night before. And by the time you got the sandwiches the following day, the jam had sunk away into them. And I used to say, Tommy Sands brought me in wheaten bread and beetroot.
That's right.
But that looks like beetroot today, isn't it?
But the one thing about Gene, he was very good. He would always ask you politely for the sandwich after he had eaten it.
Two fellas walked into a pub in Armagh at lunchtime eating sandwiches, and the barman says, hey boys, you're not allowed to eat your own food in here, so they swap sandwiches. And we used to sing in class. Father trainer, who took us for football, used to allow us to have like a wee sort of mini concert now and again. And you would do songs, and I always sung from The Big Grand Coolie Dam, Lonnie Donegan.
Oh, the world of 7 wonders.
Where the travellers often tell.
Do you remember it? What key would that be in?
Now the world holds 7 wonders that the travellers often tell. Some travellers on some towers, I guess you know. But the greatest of these wonders was in Uncle Sam's fur land. The great Columbia River and the Big Grand Coolie Dam. That was it, Lonnie Donegan, those were the days. This wee boy from Tagee went down to Belfast one day to Burton's Tailors, and he got this gorgeous suit on the tick. Remember they used to have the tick, fellas? Remember? The pound down and the change of address. And Burton's kept writing into that in letters. He never paid a halfpenny on it. And they had a thing in Burton's whereby they called in your Christian sense of duty, and they sent them this wee letter and they put a quotation from the Bible on it: "You were naked and we clothed you." But he knew the Bible too, and he sent one back to them: "You were a stranger and I..." I left college in 1964, and rather than go to university, because I really didn't have the brains, I went to work for Maxall, the oil company. In those days, there were cons off the Ormer Road. And I remember the very first annual dinner dance that I ever went to. It was the Lansdowne Court Hotel on the Antrim Road. I was still there, and they got me up and I sang Delilah with a real band, a band with guitars and drums and real microphones. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life. And that sort of was the impetus to get back into show business.
Gene Fitzpatrick has just made his first LP record. Now, I'd like you to have a look at it because the cartoons are done by Raoul Fries, and they really are brilliantly clever. Tonight, Gene faces a television camera for the very first time in his life. Ladies and gentlemen, from Craigavon, Mr. Gene Fitzpatrick.
Ian Paisley went to visit a hospital in Belfast. Looked in this wee ward, only wee tiny ward, 25 beds, and at the bottom of each bed there was a big, and at 23 of the beds a big letter P, and the other 2 beds the letters RC. Well, sister, I see I'm well represented today, yes. 23 P's, they must be members of my flock, and only 2 members of the Church of Rome. Says, how long must I got it all? Them 23 P's want porridge for breakfast, the 2 boys want Rice Krispies.
This wee fella from Armagh, God love him, was living over in Scotland last Christmas, and he sent his mommy home a wee Christmas, you know the way I do. And he phoned her up and back and says, "Hello, mommy, it's Sean here. Did you get the present?" He sent us beautiful, you want to see it. It was this lovely African bird that spoke about 9 or 10 different languages. It's a gorgeous thing. And she says, did you get the... Says, "I did. It was delicious." He says that bird wasn't for cooking. That was a rare, exotic African bird that spoke 9 or 10 different languages. Says, "Sean, it's the one that didn't say something before I put it in the oven." That's as close as ever I want to get the birds. I actually hate the brats. I have a phobia about them because I remember when I was a wee fella out in my aunt's farm, out in Points Pass, and chased by a mad rooster. Chased right through, and I actually went through a barbed wire fence to get away from them, ripped the clothes of me as well to get away from them, and I just treat all birds exactly the same. Then I had this brainwave. To cure the phobia, I came down to the enemy here in Banbridge to watch Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It scared the living daylights out of me.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, you're on.
I hope they're friendly.
This wee man went to the doctor in Limavady. And the doctor examined him, and he says, "You've only got 3 minutes to live." He says, "Doctor, could you do anything for me?" He says, "I could boil you an egg."
shouldn't have been making jokes about hospitals. Not the way I was carrying on. I smoked like a trooper. 80 days sometimes. I read that much about stopping smoking and decided to give up reading. I read somewhere too that Northern Ireland had the worst heart attack record in the world, but that had nothing to do with me, so I just carried on. Until one night it suddenly occurred to me that I was turning my own lights out.
One of the major problems in show business I found over the years is the availability of all. Because you come off the stage and everybody wants to buy you a drink. And for quite a number of years in my early days in show business, I took the quite a number of drinks that were put in front of me, and discovered after about 4 or 5 years that I was beginning to like it much. But thankfully, I was able to stop before I did any damage. And I always like to say that I found out that you can't take drink in an empty head. And I think that's what I was doing, taking drink in an empty head. But and I've lived without it for about 20 years now, and it's probably the greatest decision I've ever made in my life. Wee drunks coming down Castle Street in Belfast, and he's all over the place like an MFI wardrobe. Nuns come walking up towards him, one walked around that side and the other one walked around that side. He says, how the hell did she do that? This is the K Club. This is like our club in Banbridge, you know. The only difference in this and Banbridge, if you die, is a member that fly the flag at half-mast for 2 days, and then there's 40 phone calls to the locker. We have some wonderful courses up in the north. We have Royal County Down, we have Royal Portrush, and we have the new one now in South Armagh, Royal Cross Maglen, where you get free drops from Land Rovers, and where you're walking towards the trees and the trees are walking towards you. It's the only golf course in Ireland you're not allowed to hit a provisional.
Someone said to me, Frank, what's your golf like today? And I said, like you, Gene Fitzpatrick's act. Terrible.
The reason why we're playing so slow at Egypt, Frank Carson's up in front, going, the way I tell him. So the way he hits them. That's what's keeping us back today. This big gypsy woman walked into the clubhouse in Cross Maglen with a parrot sitting on her shoulder. She says, if any of you boys could tell me what this bird is on my shoulder, you've got a free sex. And this boy from Dundalk says, would it be a turkey? She says, that's close enough. Thank you, God bless you. Thank you.